No need to tell me, I already know how good this figure is. Out of all the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, Carnotaurus has had the most interesting history when regarding figures. Starting from the elusive and sought-after demon figure, to the obscure bone breaker, to the cancelled figure from the early 2000s, and finally coming back into the toy line for its film debut in Fallen Kingdom. And now that it's been introduced into the Hammond collection, does it do it justice? Well, it's great, but it isn't flawless. How's that the case? Well, let's take a look at it. The painting and sculpting for this figure is brilliant. A majority of the body is a dark maroon with dark brown marks running down the body and a light gray underbelly. Believe it or not, a lot of depictions of Carnotaurus you see in pop culture are usually a mix of reds and browns, with some exceptions. One of which being from the Jurassic Park franchise itself, featured in the Lost World arcade game. This one's closer to its appearance in the novel. Now, even though the Demon and Bonebreaker figures were released beforehand, I blame Disney for this trend. Yes, really. This brings me back to when dinosaur ANVs that used 3-day grace and skillet were a thing. Things were simpler back then. And you know what? They cooked with that. In my opinion, this color scheme works really well. With an appearance like this, and the fact that its name means meat-eating bull, why wouldn't it look like that? Wouldn't you be terrified if this thing walked up to you? Seeing this thing in the dark would give off straight-up cryptid energy. They were already kind of like that in the novel. Also, side note, apparently cryptid energy is a brand of energy vape liquid, which is something I didn't know about until I looked it up. In terms of proportions, it's done very well. It looks fairly accurate to what was used in the film. In fact, the last well-proportioned Carnotaurus we got from Mattel was from the Fallen Kingdom line, which is still a great figure. It looks almost close to its film appearance. Plus, its action features both simple and fun. This really stims the tism.
Giggity giggity. Giggity goo.
However, things changed with the release of the Primal Attack figure, as it came with a larger head and feet for its action feature, being able to thrash around other figures. Now, I understand the changes, but it just doesn't look right to me. It's like resorting to cannibalism. Like, I understand why people would do it, but really, I don't think they should. What, too weird for you? Well, some Abelisaurs were cannibals like Majungasaurus, but I don't know if Carnotaurus was or not. That, and I don't know if any of them were found in Haiti.
That joke is about as dead as those guys on those dinner plates.
Going back to the Hammond collection figure, the head is the best looking out of this line. The teeth don't look oddly large compared to the other figures, and nor is it sculpted onto the actual jaws themselves. Instead, they made an entirely separate mold for the teeth and placed it inside the mouth. The only other figure that I can think of that did this was the T-Rex. Speaking of which, the transparent eyes make a return in this figure. However, unlike the T-Rex figure, the eyes look a lot less cloudy. Although, while they're a bit more visible, the pupils look a bit small.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if the eyes were difficult to catch on camera. That's because the horns are casting a shadow over them and they're a bit deep within the head.
Moving down towards the claws, they're unfortunately unpainted. I get that these are pathetically tiny, but the same could be said about the T-Rexes. Granted, they are larger in comparison, but it'd be nice if they still painted them. Speaking of things that are unpainted, the dew claws are also unpainted. I've never understood why the paint on the dew claws are inconsistent. It shouldn't be that difficult, right? On the other hand, the proportions of the feet are done well, as they're not overly sized. Now, as strange as that might sound, this was a complaint I've heard a lot of people had with the T-Rex. Considering that other theropods in the line, specifically the mid-size ones, had no problem supporting themselves without sizing up the feet. Had the guys at Mattel done that with the Carnotaurus, then it would have ruined the look of the figure for me.
I kid you not, a lot of people don't like the T-Rex's feet so much so that you can actually buy third-party replacement parts for them online. One other thing I'd like to mention is that I like how they sculpted in the bumps in the body. You can actually feel them.
Lastly, the gray underside stops abruptly before it reaches the tail, and the dark brown marks stop before the end of it. Okay, I know that I've been picking away at the paint applications for a bit, but come on, when we already have a figure that doesn't have these paint inconsistencies that I mentioned previously, wouldn't you be annoyed by this too? Sure, the T-Rex figure isn't 100% perfect, but it was better than what was released before. Shouldn't the other figures released afterwards carry on the same way? I know that I just went on a little rant, but overall the figure is still pretty good. I'd say that it's a bit higher than the Ankylosaurus in terms of looks. I know that I had my problems with it, but it's not anything deal-breaking. As for the articulation, it's pretty standard for a Hammond collection figure. The mouth can open, but the jaws work simultaneously. It's similar to the T-Rex's, but without the ratcheting. It's not terrible, but I don't really get the change when compared to the other carnivores from the line. The head can move up and down and side to side. The neck can do the same, but its range is much more limited compared to the head. The shoulders can rotate and can move in and out. The elbows can bend and swivel. Now this would be the part of the review where I bring up the Hammond collection concave Ravenator and how these figures need wrist articulation, but I don't know if this thing really needs it. I believe that added posability is better than no posability, but in this case here, I think it'd be kinda unnecessary. I could argue about the lack of wrist articulation, but then I'd have to argue if it needed elbow articulation too, considering that the real-life Carnotaurus probably couldn't bend them anyways, let alone its clone counterpart.
The reason why I bring this up is because there seems to be a sculpted wrist on the arm, which is what a lot of other theropods in this line also have, where a joint could be placed into. However, the mainline Carnotaurus doesn't have this. Speaking of which, one other reason why the Fallen Kingdom Carnotaurus looks so good in my opinion is because the arms look fairly accurate to the actual animal, as they're much smaller and are leaning towards the body, which is something I can't say about the older Kenner figures, especially Bonebreaker, jeez. Now am I going to compare all of these to the real-life animal? No, because comparing the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park and their real-life counterparts has been done to death. Here, you want to see me turn this Dilophosaurus into something a little bit more scientifically accurate? Boom. Now all I gotta do is just tar and feather my raptors and give my T-Rex freaking laser eye surgery. Oh my gosh.
Am I looking too deep into this? Yes. So let's just say that it's good that the arms can articulate in the first place. In other words, added posability is good when executed correctly. Except for the waist on the majority of these figures. Why can't it move? It would have worked perfectly for a figure of this size. Well, moving to the legs, the thighs can rotate, can spread, and each of the other parts of the legs can bend and swivel. And lastly, the tail's on a ball joint, and the rest of it is bendy wire. The posability of this thing ain't bad. It's pretty much what you get with Hammond collection figures, but like the rest of them, I do wish they had a bit more. As for accessories, it has none, so let's just jump into the size comparison. This figure's actually in a whole new size range. You get an entire 19 inches of Carnotaurus that's also 8 inches tall. Here's the Figmasake Izioi, the NECA SOS Goji, the Amber Collection Velociraptor, the Hammond Collection Velociraptor, another horned theropod, the Hammond Collection Ceratosaurus, the Hammond Collection T-Rex, the Fallen Kingdom Carnotaurus, and the Primal Attack Toro. So, should you get this guy? Despite my grievances, I still think that this is a really good figure. Since this is in a new size range, it'll be roughly $30, which is not a bad deal. Even though it doesn't have as many pinups as I want it to have, it's still good the way it is. I wish Mattel would stop being inconsistent with their pain and articulation on their figures. It's as if some of them get better treatment than others. If you're going to add improvements to one figure, why not keep doing that going forward with the other figures? I know that I nitpicked a bit in this review, but considering what I've seen Mattel do with their T-Rex and Ankylosaurus figures, such as adding waist articulation and better tail articulation, I just want to see these things get implemented into other figures. The reason why I'm complaining about this is because when it comes to articulated Jurassic Park dinosaur figures, this is all that we have readily available at the moment. All I can do is hope that they keep moving forward without taking any steps back. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video, whenever that'll be. Imagine if they release a Spinoceratops figure at this scale. That'd make the Triceratops figure look even worse. Just give us a 2.0.